didn't bring me any breakfast, though.
Yeah, you'd never be around a bigger drag than Breakfast Barry.
I know. Now, Barry Grant's in the studio with us today, so we're.
I was excited because, I called Mike yesterday and I said, Mike, I'm coming in. I'd like to come in the morning. And, I've got some things for the owners of the station. And I thought maybe they'd like to have some money.
And, that's always good.
Yeah.
They probably do.
Exactly. And I said, well, are you going to be there like after 9? Oh, yeah. Mark Breckbill's going to be. Oh, good. I said, I can come in late and be on time.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you were early.
I was.
See, it's.
I waited till you cleared the door, and then I said, "Now I can go in." Okay, he's there. The host is there.
Yeah, so it's good. For those of you that are not regular listeners, you should have joined us this morning.
But really, what are you doing?
What are you doing? There's better things to do. It's nice outside. But for those of you that are regular listeners at WSTU, of course, Barry. He's been around for hundreds of years.
Yes,
the guy's ancient.
Yes.
But
very old and wise.
Yeah, old. Well, the wise part is that we'll find out about wise.
I'm a wise guy.
Yeah,
no, really,
you are a wise guy.
That's
true. But we on Wednesdays we kind of do play it a little loose. We talk about some different things. Usually, talk about some economic and financial issues that generally might be impacting you. But that today it was funny that you were in, Barry, and so I figured I'd take an opportunity to grab you because I kind of wanted to not talk political, but just some general stuff that's going on in the world that I kind of find interesting. Just from a what's it going to be like down the road standpoint. And I know you do a lot of different things. You're involved in a lot of things in the community and have been for a long time. And you've been around here for a long time with the community, so you're aware of some stuff. But I was just thinking the other day, it's kind of funny because we get all wrapped up in political things, and when you really boil it down, a lot of times to the individuals, there's not a whole lot of difference in the way people are, really.
Right.
They may espouse a political philosophy, and which usually has some sort of a life background, and I was thinking about that. I mean, we all are affected how we look at stuff. The other day, I was in a meeting with a politician, and I won't really call him a politician, but young guy, and I always had a perception of what he might think, but he grew up here, so I'm thinking, he grew up here. It's going to be pretty much along the same line. Mm-hmm. And it was funny. He made a comment that I thought was interesting, and it kind of does reflect where we grow up. I grew up, in an ag community. I wasn't my dad wasn't a farmer. My grandfather was, but so I have a certain ethic. Get up early, get the job done. Work till you can. And,
feed the
provide.
chickens.
Provide for your family. The whole thing.
Scrape the barn.
Right. It's up to you as the individual. Nobody's going to help you out.
And you're still scraping the barn.
Barely scraping the barn. There's a lot of that stuff that I'm shoveling.
That's true.
Usually it's on Mondays and Wednesdays.
That's right.
But anyway, but he made a comment that I thought was kind of interesting. Is he said that he made a comment that government can't solve all of your problems. And this is from a guy I kind of consider to be a little bit on the liberal side. Maybe he said, government can't solve all your problems, but he said what the purpose of government is, he thinks is to understand what the potential problems are that we're going to be facing, and keep us focused individually on how to solve those problems so that we don't drift off. What he was saying is basically that, and I'm kind of paraphrasing completely here, but that the government is really just a rudder to get us back onto course. We collectively are the ship that's going to to make all this stuff happen. And it was an interesting concept. I've never really heard that expressed that way. The individual is Mike Meyer, the new commissioner that we have in the city, and I was amazed at some of the. I mean, he's really got some focus in
what are the young guns?
Yeah. And it's we hear so many things about where the young people are in terms of politics and not wanting to maybe not wanting to always want to have things given to them sometimes. And so I was amazed at his political or life philosophy, which I think is, and it's reflective, I think, to some degree of where we're at. If you come from an environment where, you're like Martin County, it can be a tough place to grow up. It was a tough time back then. The weather wasn't the best in the world. The mosquitoes could eat you alive, those kind of things. You grow up in that kind of environment, even if you go off to become something else, to go out and maybe have some other career path. It was interesting where those, his basic philosophy was coming from, and it's an interesting thing, and I think about that as we go through. And one of the things I was thinking about was I know you get involved in education and some of those kind of things a little bit in terms of over the years have been involved in that.
Yes,
and the
that's become even more important to me. I can tell you because of my grandchildren.
Exactly.
And my children went to school in Martin County, and they went through. Let's see, we moved here in '82, so the oldest kids were in middle school at the time, and they went through and graduated at South Fork High School. Bulldogs, okay, all three of them. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
And so now I have two granddaughters at South Fork High School. I've got a granddaughter at let's see, David L. Anderson Middle School. I've got a grandson at Hidden Oaks Middle School. I've got another granddaughter at Bessie Creek Elementary. So yes, I would say that when you're looking at education in this county, I think it's a top priority. And I see that there's a lot of people, and I'm sure you will agree with me, is that there's a lot of people who look at Martin County as a great place to live because of our education system.
Right.
And it's very, very important for us. I was very encouraged to see that I'm not a great believer in pushing up taxes. But I was glad to see that we did take the procedure to go ahead and get that half-cent tax increase for our education system, because I think it's vital. I think we really need that money.
And that's exactly what I was getting to. See, you and I probably, come up have somewhat of a basic philosophy about things, but there's always criticism of people, in terms of relative to the school system, where you would get some people that, let's say, have a conservative philosophy or a less tax, no tax philosophy, small government philosophy, which is generally, I have some of that. I'm a libertarian type person. But it's interesting, and this is what I've always said, at this level, we live this, and we do care. We have grandkids now, so, we grew up in this community job-wise or whatever. I moved here just about the same time. I was 86, and my kids went through the schools here, both Martin County graduates, but
County Tigers, yeah,
that's right. But and listening to WST Sports.
Oh, absolutely.
But anyway, so it's interesting though that it's the same thing. I mean, I really believe, as you said, that it's really important. So when we get to this level, you talk about. And we recognize that our teachers have to be paid well. They have to have a future. They have to have jobs. It's kind of funny because there are things that are important and to the community and to us individually. The 4-story height restriction. Nobody in the world. I mean, I don't care what your philosophy. Nobody wants it, because that's what makes Martin County unique.
Exactly.
And it's all those kind of things. People, we have the no growthers and the pro growthers and all those kind of things, but they really aren't. I mean, we're all in general opposed to that kind of to that kind of growth that we don't, that's not consistent with what we grew up with here in Martin County. We're used to that. That's part of our lives. We don't like that change. In fact, somebody made a comment the other day at a meeting I was at that the only people that want to keep Martin County the way it was hundreds of years ago are the people that have only been here 10 years or less.
Exactly. No,
the rest of us that were, that grew up, we don't want to keep it exactly the way it was.
But
there was nothing here.
Believe me, when I start to hear those arguments from people who say, "Well," I said, "Well, when did you move here?" "Oh, I moved here in '09."
That's right.
oh nine,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
and you're complaining about the growth situation here. I said, where were you in 1957
Yeah.
when my family came, and there was vacant lots on US 1 in Pompano Beach?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been blessed to see a lot of growth. I've seen it. I've seen growth the wrong way,
Right.
and I've seen growth the right way. And I think if we just, we've got a wonderful thing here in Martin County that gives us that is a plan that people many years ago decided, say, let's get this growth plan in place,
Right.
and then let's make sure that we kind of follow the growth plan. And as long as we're following the growth plan, we're in pretty good shape. One of the things I told you guys before we got on the air here, I just recently moved.
Right.
After 32 years of being in the same house out in the country, yeah, I moved in town.
Yeah, and during that 32 years, you actually went from being in the country to almost being in the city. So
No, I am in the city now. I'm in the city, and I actually voted. I voted in the last city election,
See?
which
Wow.
was really that was a tremendous thing, because I'd never been able to, even though my residency was, always Stewart, Florida. I was never able to actually vote in a Stewart city election.
Right.
But now I am, because I live in this 1,000 square foot thing. Oh, it's an apartment. That's
Yes.
right. Yeah.
I love those.
Yeah, they're just great. But anyway, I'm saying that there's so many wonderful things that are happening inside the city of Stewart, and now all of a sudden I'm surrounded by wonderful places to go out to eat.
Right.
There's new places that are coming on, that are coming in right around the corner from me. I mean, I could walk to these places, but I would rather spend my money on gasoline and drive to those places. And but these are all things that are happening within that plan, that comprehensive plan.
Well, and it's funny. I've said on a number of occasions that one of the best things we have is our comp plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because it allows us self-rule. That is the big advantage of the comp plan, is that we can make this community however we want to make it. The state doesn't tell us how we have to make it.
That's right.
As long as we have a plan.
Back off, state.
That's
off.
right. And that's good, because, the state doesn't always do things that we would want to do here in Martin County.
Really? I haven't noticed.
Yeah, occasionally they do. So we can focus on what we want. The problem I have with the comp plan, and it's not with the comp plan actually, the problem I have with that concept is twofold. One, the comp plan is just that. It's a living document that needs to be looked at. Kind of something like the Constitution. Periodically you have to look at it and say, is this still who we are? And we may need to modify things or tweak it. But in that regard, though, I'm not talking about major stuff. I'm just saying that we originally put a plan together that defined where we wanted growth, population growth, and that kind of thing. And are we still doing that? I mean, I know a lot of the concepts or concerns have to do over the years. Things are changing, where you've got with Lyft and Uber and all of those kind of things. You do have issues with the traffic. Issues are changing. Things that are urban are changing, and things that you can do. But so the one thing is just the fact that people sometimes forget that isn't etched in stone 40 years ago, and you never change it again. It's like Mike Meyer said, in effect. He didn't say this about the company, but basically what I'm saying is that it's a plan. That's a goal. The government needs to keep you on that goal, and periodically look at whether those goals need to be tweaked, changed. It's the same thing with the CRA plan or the government's plan, the city's plans. There's a goal, and we should follow those goals, have workshops, and see where we're at. But
Right.
But at the same time, tweak it. So that's my first thing. The second thing that I have a problem with the comp plan or the concept of the comp plan is that although there's a financial component, there's not a funding component. And I think that, the whole concept behind the comp plan is to identify what we want to do, and what we as a community want to do. And that's a good thing. But if there's not a funding mechanism with it, or a funding plan with it. In other words, saying, okay, we want to do this, and so we're going to limit the amount of we're going to limit businesses to the infrastructure to 4 stories. Okay, so that means we're going to have less density in general in the county. So there's going to be tax dollars that are going to be going. So how are we going to make those tax dollars up? Well, we're going to utilize the sales tax to fund this. We're going to use bonding to fund infrastructure. Things like that as to how we're going to fund those things, so that the average person can look at it and say, well, I like that idea, but if we do it, I can't afford to live here. And and that's what's kind of missing in the process right now. Is there's a lot of good things, and I think they should stay. But I think it's that a lot of our people, younger people in particular, should have an understanding of what that costs. They should know how it's going to be funded, and whether it's schools or whatever else. That's why the whole thing with the school issue and the funding was a good thing. I mean, they needed to have some of that money, and where it needs to come from. To some degree, it needs to come from property taxes, and to some degree, it needed to come from sales tax. But I think that's the thing that I've said lately is that when there's an amendment to the comp plan, there also should be something to put together as to how that is going to be funded. Is it going to be funded out of operating money? I mean, are we going to fund road construction and all of that out of operating money? Are we going to fund it out of bonding and then pay the bonds off, or how are we going to do that? And what impact that's going to have on the consumer in Martin County? Because I think, like you, we would love for you've got your kids here. I've got I've got my son here. My daughter's up in Orlando, and one of the reasons my daughter's in Orlando is that the jobs, money wise, just way too much. We don't have that kind of thing.
Exactly. We don't have that base of opportunity for people to go to work and make a decent living, and those are the kind of things that are really, really important. Those are the things that I worry about for my grandchildren.
Right. That's me too.
I mean, I have been in the county since 1982, and I've seen a lot of wonderful kids graduate from Martin and South Fork and now Jensen Beach. I've had the great opportunity of being at the graduating night where they have received awards to go to higher education.
Right.
And, in a lot of cases, those kids leave and they'll never come back.
Right.
And that's sad, because that's our future. That's so we are sending our future. We're sending those talented, brilliant kids to places like Orlando and Tallahassee and Jacksonville, and Tampa and Atlanta, and wherever they might find their higher education aspiration, and then they stay there.
Yeah.
And then we've lost an asset. We've lost an opportunity, and it would be great to see. We're definitely. I mean, you see the growth as I do with all of the 55 plus assisted living. I had the pleasure of being the MC for my 35th year for the Stewart Christmas Parade, brought to you by the Visiting Nurse Association of Florida. Plug. I thought I'd throw that.
You can. They also let us have the tree for the Riverwalk stage down there, so I appreciate that.
They're great. They're great. And of course, Don Crow was right beside me, and we were talking about all the wonderful things that are happening with the 55 plus. But as any kind of situation that you have with a community that has said to everybody, hey, come here and we'll take care of the 55 plus generation. Well, it's just as I've said many times. How many times have you gone to Sonny's Barbecue and had an 85-year-old woman wait on your table?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay? Doesn't happen. It's usually a younger person. And where are those, where are we?
All those service jobs.
Where are we putting the service population? Are we putting them all in Port St. Lucie? Is that where they're all going? I mean, is that what it's all about? Why can't they live in Martin County? Where's the opportunity for them?
It's interesting that that is, in many cases, if they're here at all, they're in St. Lucie County, but St. Lucie County is getting expensive. The proposal that they had for the redevelopment of Sailfish Park, and I thought it was kind of funny down there. There was an RFP put out for a proposal to redo the ball fields. And I was on that review committee on the proposals. So I saw all the proposals that came in. I read the RFP, and but it's funny on that. First of all, there were a bunch of people that came to a meeting. The meeting lasted for a gazillion hours. Everybody's kids crying because we're going to strip the ball field from them.
Yeah.
Ironically, there's like 20 kids that are actually residents of the city of Stewart. So the citizens of Stewart were paying a ton of money to have 20 kids play ball. The rest of them are from Sewell's Point, Palm City, and private activities, private leagues now, making money off of the whole process. And so you look at that and say, geez, that doesn't seem to make sense. But my thought, though, on it was this. We're not going to need those ball fields in 10 years because there's no housing for the young people to stay here, find a partner who wants to stay here, get married, have a kid, and need the ball fields. And what doesn't happen is somebody at 22 or 23 doesn't go off on a percentage basis, get married, live someplace for 30 years or 20 years, and then just all of a sudden move back trying to find a job, which they don't exist, Yeah. So what happens is that what should happen and does happen in most of the communities you came from when you moved up from Pompano and all that kind of stuff, is that you kind of you kind of grew up, you found somebody probably you went to school with, or maybe you went to college and met somebody, and then you came back to your community or around your community, at least considered that, and then you kind of decided, okay, then you bought a house and had a kid, and and it just developed over time, and so the next thing you're there, and you're one of the people supporting it, and you're back, and your kids are staying, and all of that process. I just thought it was so ironic that we're trying to save ball fields for kids to play on, and there won't be any kids in the community by the time we're done because nobody can afford it because they can't get a job and they can't get housing. And so
it's a catch-22. There's no question.
But realistically, one of the proposals that was made from Rich Properties was a unique proposal, I thought, as it related to workforce housing. A lot of times there's a desire to put, from a workforce housing standpoint, is to designate a certain unit or units as workforce housing. Okay, and so they subsidize those units. So what happens there, though, is from a market standpoint, because those units are being subsidized, they're below market rents. All right, when you do an appraisal of that property for purposes of financing it or for purposes of the property appraiser, the limiting value is the income approach. Because unlike a house, when you buy a house, you buy your single family home and it's appraised basically on two methods: the replacement cost and the comp value, what other houses are selling for. Okay. But in the commercial arena, which would include apartments, it's valued on replacement cost, comp values, and the income approach. If you can't make, on the commercial side, if you can't make enough income to support the value, it reduces the value. And lenders only loan on that, and the appraisers use that as a value for appraisal. So if you designate a block or a series of houses as subsidized housing for workforce housing, which we need desperately, you also then drive the value of those units down because of the appraisal effect. It has nothing to do with who's there or anything else. It has to do with the income approach driving down the value of those units. And so when you do that, that means that the assessed value on it is less, the tax dollars are less, and there's less dollars coming into the community to help support the community because that project doesn't generate the tax revenue it should for the community. And so there were two proposals that were the New Urban Communities. The one that's building Azul over here was one of the proposals. Interestingly enough, because they're putting that within the CRA, that was going to generate about $700,000 to the city of Stewart. That's big numbers, big numbers. But Rich Properties had a really unique proposal. In what they did is, instead of designating units as workforce housing, you came in and you wanted to rent a unit. And if you worked in the city of Stewart for Martin Memorial, the city of Stewart, the school board, or whatever, as long as you worked within the city limits of the city of Stewart, If you didn't make at least 90% of the average salary
Mhm.
in Martin County, I think they used, or it may have been in the city of Stewart, but I think it's Martin County, then you got a subsidy. And if you were 60%, you got a bigger subsidy. Now, the only person that knew you had a subsidy was you and Rich Properties, because the unit wasn't any different. It wasn't finished any different. It didn't have any different appliances.
Mhm.
It still had the same recreational facilities. It still had everything else that would have made it a higher end unit that would have been more expensive. But that particular unit was being subsidized. Now, because it's a particular unit, yeah, it's going to affect it overall from the standpoint that the total income on the project, but not nearly to the extent it does if you limit the building itself, you know?
And it's certainly having people in the building is also going to lend itself to the taxes, the sales tax, that is a very important part
Right.
of any civilization that we
Yeah.
have here in the United States of America. So, when you have cities and you have counties, they're concerned, yes, about property taxes. They are. But they're also concerned about what are you spending as far as the sales tax is concerned, and how much of that are we going to get?
You know what's funny about that though is from the city standpoint, and the city has been actively trying to lobby City of Stewart, along with other cities in the state of Florida, to be allowed to put in their own discretionary sales tax. And I'll tell you why. The way that the sales tax dollars are allocated, it's based on population. So even though the City of Stewart may generate a significant amount of sales tax revenue because their business is located there, the percentage of that they get back is based on their population versus the total county population. So the split that comes back isn't based on where it's generated, which you would think, right?
Mhm.
It's based on the population where it's generated. And so because the City of Stewart, has got a much smaller percentage of the total population in Martin County, it is tough for the city. It is tough for the city to fund things using a sales tax because they generate far more dollars for the county. It's kind of the opposite of CRA. With CRA, you generate any growth after you establish your CRA, any growth beyond that goes to the city, not to the county. So the increased property value of the CRA, any assessments on that, and the property taxes on that. So it kind of is a weird situation. Is
Yeah.
that the city has a difficult funding thing, and that's why I say some of this stuff is really. That's why our comp plan and the way that they're doing things, it's good to have that. But there ought to be some tie because, there ought to be some tie-in on how some of these things are getting funded just down the road. It's interesting and it's complicated because a lot of people don't realize. I didn't realize it until I got involved in the city and some of the things that are going on there. And I know Tom Campenny, who used to be on the commission, he was the representative of the commission at I think the whatever of cities, and he made that point a number of times that the sales tax are limited as to what comes actually back to the City of Stewart, which I hadn't realized it was based on population. You think it'd be based on, they know what the numbers are. You think it'd be based on where it's generated, right?
Well,
If your historic downtown is generating all of this revenue, you'd think that and it does. I mean, even things like, for example, Terra Firmata.
Oh, yeah.
You pay sales tax when you go to Terra Firmata. There's tax on those tickets.
absolutely.
Any of these events that we have, any of the restaurants downtown, all that sales tax. There's huge amounts of sales tax.
But there's another thing that hit me when I was talking with Superintendent Lori Gaylord about her situation with the Martin County school system.
Right.
And that is that roughly about 40% of the taxes that were coming in for Martin County that should have been given to the school system
Go somewhere else.
goes somewhere else. It
Right.
goes to the state pot, which of course, because of our wonderful value of Jupiter Island and the wonderful people that are here, the 1% of the 1% is what I call it.
Right.
Since they're here and we have such a
We're a property-rich county.
well-heeled county,
Right.
which is really kind of a dichotomy because there's a lot of poor here too. But at the same time, most of the money goes to somebody else's school system, and that's why it was so imperative that half-cent sales tax get back to Martin County.
Yeah, that's the thing. And because and that's why I say those funding mechanisms are important, and that's why that had to be done the way it had done. It was done because if the school board had done it all with property taxes, we lose some of those dollars. There's an impact on that, and
It would not have had that.
Right.
Impact is the great word, because it would not have had the impact that it's going to have now, as those funds are designated.
Right.
It's sort of like being in a church when you have a designated fund, man.
Right.
That designated fund goes to that
Yeah.
project, and that's that alone.
I grew up Catholic. We were always funding the building fund.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm Catholic light. I'm Episcopalian.
Yes, you
so
funded the same thing.
yeah, I know all about it. But at the same time, I mean, that is designated for the school system here in Martin County, and that, and the fact that it is a sales tax, it evens it out, not just for property owners, but for people like me who are living in an apartment,
Right.
in a 1,000 square foot hovel.
It's, but Barry, I told you before we started that you were at least successful. The goal is to, for me at least, and I think for a lot of people that are getting to my age in the 60s, the goal is to, is kind of slow down a little bit in terms of, but not quit, and then downsize.
Yes.
My concern has always been that I'm going to downsize and slide right past that 1,000 square foot apartment into a self-storage unit that I'm going to be living in.
Dave
Dave
Sator, are you
Sator.
listening?
Yeah, Dave.
We need another storage unit.
That's right. I'll
Yeah.
trade you out tax services for a
Absolutely.
little storage unit.
And you
over
need
there.
some advertising done? Okay, Dave, there's two right there. So
You can
come
be
on.
my neighbor.
Absolutely.
So, but it's what you're talking about is it's interesting because people don't really fully understand the finances. That's one of the reasons that one of the things we do on the show is just in general is kind of talk about some of that stuff, just so people understand what the factors are. Because the school is a perfect example. The state educates statewide,
Mhm.
regardless of really what the cost of that education is.
Yeah.
And so we send all of our money to the state, and they reallocate it back out. Now, on the capital fund side, building schools, we get to keep that money. There's some of that money we get to keep. But the problem with it is we can build a school, we just can't operate it because we don't have any money to operate the school. We can't get teachers, we can't get custodians, we can't get extended day. There's none of that we can get.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, I know. So that's why they're always willing to. We can do the repairs to like Jensen Beach. Or you can do a major repair type.
How about
thing.
Martin County? How many
Right.
times we've rebuilt that school up?
Right.
How many times?
But you can't build any new stuff because there's no money for teachers. The other thing that you sent your kids to the school system, I did too. It's a tremendous advantage. A little funny story. When I moved up here from Palm Beach County in 1986, I moved to Florida in 1982. So I'm new to the community too.
You're a newbie, man.
I'm
just a newbie.
So I didn't grow up here, but so I moved up here in '86, and at the time I was working with a guy. We were starting a bank down in. We had been starting a bank down in Boynton Beach. Okay.
That's where I grew up.
Yeah, so
Yeah, Boynton Beach.
yeah, so we were out off of Linton. Where Linton
Oh,
is?
yeah,
Down
absolutely.
West, we were down west off of Linton.
Oh yeah.
And so we were building a bank out there, and the president of the bank, who was one of the founders, CEO, I should say, he was from South. He had worked in a bank in Miami, but it was interesting. He had moved and spent a lot of money to move to Parkland because Parkland was the best school system in the state.
Right.
That was expensive. You couldn't buy a house in Parkland in those days. Now this is 1986,
Right.
1987, 1985. You couldn't buy a house in there for under $600,000 or $700,000. You were talking, fairly big money. It was all restricted. You had to have certain landscaping. I remember his house when he had it built. He had to have. Now this is in 1986. He had to have $15,000 worth of landscaping.
Wow.
You know, that was a requirement for every house. You had to have at least $15,000 worth of landscape. So anyway, so he spent all of this money and all of these property taxes to move into Parkland. And I moved, I'd left there, moved up to Jensen Beach. And in the year I moved, or just before I moved, Martin County went #1 and Parkland went #2 in the school, in the state in terms of school.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was in a little house in Leilani Heights and paying my taxes and getting the best school in the state of Florida. And it was really, really kind of cool. But I will tell you, and this is another thing, like I say, when it's not about politics sometimes at all, I don't think, at the local level. So you talk about schools, and we have certain philosophies, you know, we may have certain philosophies about how we want to do things federally. But I tell you, locally, because education is so important to most of us here, I will tell you, the Economic Council, it's going to be their big thing this next couple of years, is how to create workforce jobs, how to create, how to make sure that the education system is providing an education system that businesses and others want, that we in the community want. You know, people don't realize the Economic Council had gotten somewhat of a bad rap in the past because it was considered the Economic Development Council, and so people thought it was developer driven. In the old days, there were some developers involved in it because that was the industry within. I mean, the economic side was the building side. I mean, guys like, you know, Peter Cummings and people like that, they were building Martin Downs and stuff.
Absolutely.
That was the job force. But it is the Economic Council now. It's really about jobs, not about growth or anything else. It's about job growth. But it's interesting. People don't realize that the Economic Council is really just a bunch of local people that have been around a while that really care about the community and care enough to get involved to make sure that things are not getting messed up, including that there's nobody that wants to go over the 4-story height requirement. You know, nobody's in favor of that. People in the Economic Council were not in favor of Brightline. You know, they didn't have a positive thing on Brightline. They weren't sure that was going to be good for the community. But one of the things I was getting at is that they originally founded were the founding party on the Arts Council, bringing arts to Martin County,
right?
Because that's important to people that live here
Of
and
course.
jobs and
It's
everything.
culture.
Yeah, and also was one of the founding members of the River Initiative, which a lot of people don't realize, and a number of other things. Because a lot of what they've done has been behind the scenes. It's really just as kind of Mike Meyer said, making sure that people are pointing in the correct direction. Maybe not necessarily telling them exactly how to do it, but making sure that people have a voice in what's happening.
Okay.
And so, but what I was getting at is that education is going to be a big push for them because they do. All of the people are generally local, and they believe that we need the education system for the jobs that we want to create here, so that our kids and grandkids can stay here and all of that.
And our great grandkids.
And our great grandkids.
Because I've got one.
Yeah. See, and
So how do you think? Now I'm talking generationally here. If you look at it from that standpoint, because you and I are going to be gone one of these days. Okay.
someday I'm not sure, but
Who's going to be left?
you look
Okay.
well preserved.
What's it? Yeah. Well, that's because it's heavy alcohol.
That's right.
That'll
How many
preserve
years
anybody.
that works?
That'll preserve anybody. But look what it did in biology class. We use alcohol. Anyway, I digress. But you had me at alcohol there for a second. But anyway, the situation.
Great grandkids.
We want to have an area that's going to be generationally friendly to everybody who has the opportunity of living in this beautiful community. And if we can keep these wonderful people employed, gainfully employed, and nicely housed, and we can continue on, we're going to have a marvelous community for generations.
Yeah, and it'll be a great one. Mike, we're going to take a quick break. Be right back. And 220-9788, 220-WSTU if you want to comment.
Go, man, go.
All right. When it gets cold and I sit,
Well, let me tell you something.
So how have you been?
I've been good, man. I've been good. How about you?
Busy.
Yeah,
Good trivia at night.
that's what I hear.
So we got sneaky,
So where are you with the trivia?
Sneaky Tiki on Mondays.
Where's that
Right
exactly?
downtown Stewart, across from Duffy's. It's in the old Colorado Inn.
Oh yeah.
It's on the ground floor there.
Oh, that's got to be great.
Yeah, so that's fun.
Do you have a lot of people that come up?
It depends. Like, we've been busy, but then the cold, it's all outdoors, so the cold killed it this week. We're at the Tipsy Parrot, which always feels like a fight's about to break out there, but we're there tonight, and then there's a new
Who owns
Duffy's.
that place? I got a new owner.
Yeah, it's a family.
It's your family.
Yeah, the wife is named Rebecca, and the husband's name is Scott. And they made their money doing something else. And
Yeah, this is just the way they've come up with how to get rid of it.
yeah,
How to
pretty much.
get rid of the money that they've
We worked really hard all our lives, so let's open a
Yeah,
restaurant.
let's open a restaurant. And,
Yeah, that's, what is that? The highest failure rate of any business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, as long as he's got the bar, he's got one cash register that doesn't get reported to the IRS. He's a
Yeah, it's not the IRS, it's the state sales tax.
yeah, exactly.
I tell you, those are the people you don't want to mess with. They shut you down. They'll lock you up. I mean, they,
30 seconds.
but,
Yeah.
so,
And then we got the new Duffy's in Port St. Lucie. So that's fun.
Under the same leadership for more than 2 decades, Port St. Lucie Broadcasters is a place to serve both the English and Spanish-speaking communities. Come grow with us. Where experience is preferred, bilingual to plus. Port St. Lucie Broadcasters, an equal opportunity employer.
All right, 10 seconds.
On radio at AM 1450, on the web, plus Google Home and Alexa. From the Treasure Coast Toyota Studios, it's WSTU. Treasure Coast Toyota, Federal Highway, Stewart.
well, thanks for staying with us here on Treasure Coast Solutions. My name is Mark Breckville, and I've had the pleasure and continue to have the pleasure to talk to Barry Grant about some of the things that are going on in the community. And Barry and I have been friends for a long time, and of course, I do respect him a great deal, and have always respected his knowledge and his understanding of the community. And of course, he was a great radio person all those years, and done so many things in the community. He does a lot of great things on the marketing and PR side, and a lot of that is you're welcome, and a lot of that stuff is things that we're talking about. You're good at it because you care about first of all, what you represent, the clients that you represent. You care about the community. I know you did some work for Vicki Davis. I think
Absolutely.
in
I
terms
continue to do electronic media for Vicki, and I'm just so pleased with the way that she's taken a really major step in making sure that they get the information out about elections. I mean, how many other communities that got through the entire process of counting the votes and having everything ready? The polls closed at 7:00 on November 6th, and at 7:39, she had the report out as to exactly how that vote went.
Yeah. And actually,
Incredible.
and actually, she actually had real numbers.
Yes, I believe. Yes, she did have real numbers.
So yeah,
Got a great organization, got great staff, and it's just really a pleasure to work with Vicki and have her part of this community. She's another person that really cares about our community.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why getting to the school thing, and I was talking about that. And Vicki, of course, was actively involved in the schools for a long period of time.
Yes, she was.
And
her children went through the school
Right.
system here.
yeah, that's the thing. We all
And now grandchildren. She has grandchildren. So yeah.
and see that's what people don't realize is that I was talking about Mike Meyer, and and coming back, Mike is a great asset to our community. You may not agree with him 100% politically, or you may, but the point is, he's a great asset to our community because he grew up here, and he's back here, and he's participating. A lot of the city commissioners,
How about Dave Dias?
Yeah, Dave Dias, Merritt Matheson with he grew up here. You've got Kelly Glass Lake. She grew up here.
Yes.
So Becky Bruner, and even Eula has been here a long, long time.
Absolutely.
So, so those kind of people, have that, and these young people that are coming back, they're making a major contribution to where we're going to be 20 years from now, 15 years from now, and that's the thing, and a lot of that has to do with creating the education system and the job system, and one of the reasons I think that some of the people that are here or the people that are coming back have the value system that they have. And I talked about it at the beginning, was the Martin County value system that, I grew up in an ag community. I had that kind of value system. We grow up sometimes and up north, it's particularly true. You grow up with the values of your community because the people that are teachers in your community live in your community. And many of them grew up in your community. They went to school and became teachers there, right? And that was the success of Martin County, I think. And frankly, it's the problem that we have right now, I think, in the school system, is that we've let money, now this is coming from a CPA, we have let money dictate how we wanted our schools to be rather than how we really wanted our schools to be. And we have not emphasized in this community the dollars that needed to be emphasized for schools and teacher salaries in particular. When your kids were going to school, the teachers were local. They didn't make a lot of money. Always they could have gone to Port St. Lucie and make more money. In St. Lucie County, they could have gone to Palm Beach County and make more money. But what did we offer here? We offered a couple things. One, we offered a nice community. It was easy to commute. Nice community, and we offered significant retirement and health benefits. And that allowed some of our young teachers to have babies, go out, have families of their own, and then go back to work in the school system. And they had time off. Sometimes they shared leave.
Great health.
They carried their leave over.
Yeah,
they had great. And that was really important for Martin County because a lot of the jobs in Martin County that the spouse had of a teacher was a self-employed job that didn't have health insurance.
Exactly.
And so that allowed them to generate a source of income and be successful. And from that standpoint, then you could build up your vacation pay over 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
So let's say you came as a young teacher and you're 21 or 22, you just got out of college. So you for the first 5 years you might have banked your overtime. You then get married, and the next thing so you've got all this. You've got all of the not overtime vacation. Then you got all of this leave that you could take. And we used to be somewhat generous with being able to contribute leave to other parties. We still do some of that, but not nearly what we did because we let accounting principles and unfunded mandates and things like that scare the heck out of us. Now, and I know they're important, but we should pay it. That's the advantage we had, I think, over Palm Beach County and St. Lucie County.
Definitely.
So we can't compete on price. They have more property value up there in total, and both bigger counties, bigger population, and more funding. We cannot compete on price. We have to compete on benefit, and we've stopped doing that to some degree. Look at what we've done to their health benefits. I know health benefits have got expensive, but that's one of the key components of why these teachers were here. It's gotten to the point now that a teacher who has a child in the system, if they go back to work, if they work, between what they're going to pay on health care for their spouse, potentially, and for their family, right, the cost that they got to now chip in, and what they've got to pay for daycare to take their kids through school, they end up with nothing. They're working for free. And so you understand.
No, that's my job. Yeah. I'm here to work for free.
Well, you did today.
I did today. See, I told you.
I tell you, Barry, I really do appreciate you staying around. I know you've got a life. I don't, but you have a life. And so
this was a lot of fun and inspiring.
Yeah, well, it is. I love doing it. You're welcome any Wednesday morning, and also you can come visit me at my 1,000 square foot house as well. So
great, I love it.
I've got a dragon in the bedroom, and I've got stuff outside, so you can come see. Anyway,
love you, man.
Yeah, thanks, Barry, and thanks for joining us. We're here every Wednesday from 9 to 10 o'clock. Talking about whatever we want because we pay for it.
See you, Mike Thomas.
Yeah, see you. Thanks for joining us right here on WSTU Digital 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
Good show, guys.
Thank you. It's always good. It's always good to be with my good friends. Yeah. I got the first I Love St. Lucie award.
Oh, you did?
From the Indian River Initiative.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the first.